Hey, we're back for another episode. And one of the things I realized about myself is that I was treating my business as a hobby for many years. And when we do that, it causes us to not take things seriously because we don't know our long-term outcome. So let me back it up to when I was 18 years old. My goal was to go to college. I ended up going to University of Tampa. And going into college, I knew I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. But the problem was that I set the goal to get a job. I set the goal to have to start a job. And I knew I wanted a business longer term, down the line. Have you ever heard anyone say that where they're like, I want to travel down the line. I want to go experience this down the line. I want to start a business down the line. The truth is, down the line never occurs until we start to prioritize it. So what ended up happening was it was 28, I was 18, 19 years old, and I knew going to college, everyone's like, get a job, get a job, get a job. So I started applying for a bunch of jobs. I remember doing internships. And then there was this one job where I did it at a big bank, and I ended up getting an internship that summer, my junior year summer. And it ended up leading to a job offer. So my senior year, I had a job offer, and I thought, this is amazing. This is everything I wanted. And I started to realize that in that moment, that was all I wanted. And then my entire senior year, I thought, what other jobs could I get? What other opportunities could I have? I wasn't thinking about the business because my long-term goal at that moment in time was to find a job and get a job that I thought I enjoyed. And that's going to be the first lesson in this podcast is for us to constantly have our long-term vision, reevaluate it probably every 6 months to a year, and evaluate where we want to go, what we want our life to look like, what we want our experience to look like. Because if we do that, then what will end up happening is you will make better decisions in the short term towards that long-term vision. And the reason this all came up is because I speak to clients all the time. And when you're a high achiever, like most are, what ends up happening is you tend to have a lot of opportunities, whether it's new job opportunities, new business opportunities, new ways of making money, new locations, constantly having opportunities. And the challenge there is that we look at that opportunity like we judge what are we going to wear on Tuesday morning. And we constantly think like that. And we use short-term decision making for long-term vision instead of us thinking about it the right way, which is what is the long term vision? Does this feed into my long term vision of my life and help me get closer to that goal? So when I'm going through this and I get the job and I'm 22 and I'm experiencing it and I'm doing the things I want to be, what I thought I wanted to do, I knew I wanted to have the business. I knew as an entrepreneur, I wanted to start something and I identified as that. And that's where the real challenge comes up is that if we're not serving our long-term vision, then we're thinking short-term. And we're going to constantly be thinking short-term. And when you ask anyone, hey, what do you want your life to look like? What do you want to be doing? Most of us don't have an answer for what do we want our life to look like. Second of all, most of us don't ask ourselves the question of what do you want to be doing in a year? And a majority of the time, it's like, I want a promotion, or I want to get to the next level, or I want to do this. And it's all very vague. You know what I mean? I want to start a business. It's all vague. And in the vagueness that we have, there's tons of complexity that ends up occurring, which doesn't allow us to create what we want. And it feels much further away. What I mean by that is when you start to get very specific about what you want to do and how you want to create that, it becomes a lot less scary. Because I remember being there, and about 6 months in, I started to question some of the stuff I was doing in regard to how am I spending my time? How can this be more effective? How can I make this more efficient? How can I start to build the life I want? And when I went about that, I started different businesses. I had different experiences, but I was never all in on anything. And the reason that occurred was because I just thought to myself, this is just a hobby. I'm undercharging. I'm not charging what I'm worth. I'm not doing the things that a true business owner would do because I wasn't desperate, because I had the money that I needed. I didn't feel I felt the pressure a little bit, but I wasn't coming from that place of I need to make this happen. And because of that, I didn't take it as seriously. Like I remember years where I did minimal outreach. I didn't even share what I was doing with half the people I know. I didn't share on social media. I didn't share anywhere. And I didn't want to tell anyone because I wasn't proud of what it was. What I mean by that is there's a lot of us that start from ground zero and we start in the very beginning and we want to be at everyone's level 30 where they're at, where you're a full-time entrepreneur, where you're making your own money, where you're doing your own things. And the truth is that takes a lot longer. And that's why it's so scary to share that journey along. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, I don't know if I'm gonna figure it out. I don't know if it's gonna work out. I don't know if I'm gonna make this happen. And the reason that I'm sharing this is because throughout this week, I had a lot of thoughts, different conversations I had, different meetings I had, where I started to think about where's my long-term vision? Does this align with the long-term vision I'm looking at creating? And if it does, how can I start to take this thing and up level it and be a little bit more intentional about where I'm spending my time and allocating that? And that gets you to start to think about what is it that you want to do? So, like I was saying, I had the podcast in 2020. I was doing the coaching in 2019, but I wasn't doing it. Like I was kind of doing it, but I wasn't doing it. I didn't have programs, I didn't have things. I was doing one-off sessions with people and asking if they wanted to do them again. And that was the learning curve for me, and that took time. And the reason for this is that I want you to expedite your journey. I want you to do it quicker than I did, because that will allow you to feel that confidence. But the truth is, when you make a real decision, and whenever you have something that you've been debating on for a while, you want to make that decision before there's any outcome, there's any support, there's any seriousness. And the more you share that, people will start to understand why you make the decisions that you do. So as I was going through this, like I said, I was treating these as a hobby. I was doing podcasts randomly. I was doing coaching sessions sporadically. I didn't have any programs. And it was because I didn't dive in. I didn't truly dive in and see what is everyone else doing? How can I analyze the competition? How can I start to work towards that journey and start to get to where I wanted to be? And the way to do that for myself, what I ended up doing was I started to hire people. I started to invest in myself. I started to join masterminds and pay for programs and do these different things to see what everyone else was doing so I could start to understand what success looked like to me. Because the scariest part is sitting there going, I don't know what it looks like. And the same is true when you go for a job. Like the first time you go for a job, what do you want? Oh, accounting, maybe finance, maybe a nurse, maybe a teacher. And it's not always that direct. It's not always that easy, especially when there's the startup world, people are doing businesses on the side, there's things that are constantly changing. It can be very challenging for a lot of us. And that's why I want you to start to think about what is that vision for my life that you want to create? So for me, when I was looking at it, I wanted the ability to travel. I wanted the ability to work from anywhere. I wanted to do something positive in the world that helps people. And I want them to really gain a lot of value from that. And that's where I started to step into the coaching and taking it to that upper echelon and taking it a lot more seriously. And what really ended up being the catalyst for it was I was doing the coaching, I was getting clients, I had people that I was supporting, I was definitely making changes. The challenge was that I wasn't sharing with everyone. I was doing it in private. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges that you shouldn't do. I think you should share with others what you're looking at doing. And in the beginning, I think you do have to do it. It would make more sense to do it for a payment, yes, but you also almost want to give it away because you need to get reps because you're not that good at whatever that activity is unless you come from doing it in a role and then you kind of jump in there. But every single time people have new businesses, most of the time they're not the best at it because they just haven't had the experiences, and that's okay. But that gauges you to what you should be charging or can be thinking about. And the big catalyst for me that really moved me along with the podcast was hiring an editor. I hired somebody that started to edit the podcast, and each week that I didn't send them the podcast, they were constantly, Jordan, where is it? Where is it? Where is it? And that was a built-in accountability for me that truly helped me grow. It helped me hold myself accountable. It helped me reach that next level. So that is something I highly recommend, is finding people in areas to hold you accountable. The second thing was I thought about what was it like? What did I want my life to look like? And as I was in this bank, the people were nice, the people were good, but they were living lives that I didn't want to live. And that was a reality check for me. And that caused me to start to want to build out of that. And by build out of that, my goal for a long time was to leave the job and be self-sufficient. And eventually that does occur, takes time, but you want to do that earlier when there's not so much burden on you. And if there is burden on you, then you got to think about how you can expedite this. And that's where you get mentors, you get people around you, but you really truly think about it at a deeper level of like, what does my life look like in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 50 years? Because if you're not asking those questions, then life is going to be happening to you, not for you. And that's where I want you to start to think about is like, are the things I'm doing helping me get to where I want to go? Or are they stepping back? And this comes back to how do different opportunities come up for you? So once I was all in on this entrepreneurship thing, when I would get people to reach out to me for job offers, for different opportunities, I would be like, no. And they're like, what do you mean? Don't you want this job? And I would listen to them, hear them out, but I'd start to realize that I have to cut off all other options. And a lot of you listening right now might be really successful in your area. Like this isn't for someone that's on their first sale. This is for someone who's like doing their thing and realizing that opportunities are coming up left and right. And Alex Hormozy says it best, the woman in the red dress. There's going to be bigger and bigger opportunities. So at first, it's $1,000 opportunity. First, it's a $10 opportunity. Then it's 100. Then it's 1,000. Then it's 10,000. Then it's $100,000 opportunities that are coming your way. And then it's millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions. Bigger opportunities cause bigger rejection because you have to focus. When you're working towards a goal and you're working towards what you're looking to create, you must focus. And that was the hardest part for me. And that's why I had myself running around doing 5 different businesses at one time that didn't amount to anything. They amounted to some wins here and there, but I was the one pushing everything forward, which was a real challenge for me. Because what I realized is that when you decide on something, when you jump in and you take it seriously and you start to identify it, that's what you have to do. You have to identify, I am a podcaster, I am a coach, I am a change maker. Whatever that identity is for you, once you identify it, you make different decisions, right? And as you start to dive in these decisions, like for example, there's people that I coach with, I coach different groups, and sometimes that relationships moves a little bit further. And what ends up happening, you're going to their conferences, you're supporting them, you're supporting their leadership, you're supporting people in different ways, but you have to build that relationship first. Otherwise, you will not get there. But if you're juggling 10 different things, then you're not going to be able to dive deep with people. So the deeper you dive and the more focused you are on your mission and on your goal and what you're looking to achieve will change everything for you. And that's why once I left the job, which was only about a year and a half ago, once I left that, what ended up happening was I went way deeper because I had so much time, right? I had this time, but I also want to note that when you're going through this journey, I was making more money on the side 2 years prior to leaving than I was in the role. So I want you to realize that when you make these decisions, you have to be prepared to have a runway, have yourself be prepared, and then dive in. And since I've dove in, I've been going so much deeper with my clients, with my content, with the people I work with the groups that I support, with the people in my journey, because you have the time and you're not running from thing to thing to thing. And if you're constantly doing that, you're not giving your space to giving yourself space to think about what you're really looking to create. So if this is something that you're interested in, where you're like, I feel like I'm in that beginning portion where I have the good job, I have the things, but I want more and I have to do that. Here are going to be three things I'm going to recommend. One is you have to figure out what that 5 year vision is for you. What is that North Star? What are you looking to create? Secondly, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to create an identity for yourself. Work on this identity and dive in on who that person is. How do they show up? What do they do? How do they create that? And then you're going to start to pick measurable things. Measurable. The example I use that's the easiest is if you want to lose weight, what should you do? You should step on the scale every day. Why? Because you're measuring and monitoring. Measuring is the first part. You're going to see your weight go up or you're going to see it go down. That's just what it is. And yes, on a daily basis, it can swing one way or the other, but you just have to be conscious of that. Then what you want to do is you want to monitor. That monitoring portion is week one, I weighed this. Week two, I weighed this. Week three, I weighed this. And if things aren't going the right direction, we have to make adjustments to help ourselves get to where we need to go. So that's where the monitoring comes in. So I would always measure and then I would monitor to adjust the changes you're going to want to do. So as you're going through this journey, like I said, you got to start off with that North Star. You got to start off with what's that big pie in the sky? How do you want your life to be? How do you want your family to be? How do you want to spend time with your relatives? How do you want to spend time with your siblings? How do you want to create these magical moments? Then it's what identity do I need to have that inside of me? And then it's what are we going to measure and monitor? So as you're going through this, this will up level you and this will cause you to be a lot more serious about the journey that you're on. Because most of the time we just sit there and go with the flow. I got a client this week. I didn't get a client. I lost a client. This happened. This happened. And we're not being intentional about the actions. Majority of the time I'm coaching people, it's us sitting there looking at what's going well, what's going wrong, what are we going to do about it? How are we going to adjust? How are we going to get to that next level? Because so often we cannot see inside of our own glass. And that can be a real challenge for us. So that's why I invite you to listen to different podcasts, to listen to different books, to get different inputs from different people you're around, because it will start to get you to think differently and expand your mind on what is possible. Because I am going to tell you right now that anything is possible. Anything is possible that you put your mind to it. And you have to put the effort in each and every day. That is why I'm recording this on a Saturday. Most people are like, I don't work Saturday. No, we are doing this every single day because as an entrepreneur, you get that freedom. You can go to the beach on a Monday. You can go to the gym on a Tuesday. You could have three incredibly important meetings on a Sunday. You have to always be prepared for what you're looking to create. What is the lifestyle you want? And if this is something of interest to you and you want to dive in a little bit deeper with somebody else and get a different perspective, reach out to me. If you're thinking about that job, thinking about that big opportunity coming your way, not sure how to think about it, send me a DM on Instagram, Jordan F. Edwards, and send POD. So I know you're coming from the podcast. And I'm happy to have that conversation and work through that with you because there's too many of us that are trying to do this alone. We're trying to do this alone and we don't realize that we need outside perspectives. I constantly talk to high achievers. I constantly talk to winners who realize that if they can get outside perspective, outside counsel, just one question change, it'll force them to start to think differently and be more diligent about what they're doing. So I hope you got some value from this. Hope you have an incredible, incredible week, and we will talk very soon.